The autumn morning brought an unusual tension to Buckingham Palace that even the most experienced staff members could sense. King Charles stood by the tall windows of his private study, watching the London fog slowly lift from the palace gardens. His weathered hands clasped behind his back as he contemplated a decision that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. For months, whispers had echoed through the palace corridors about growing tensions between the king and Queen Camilla. What had once been a partnership built on decades of companionship had begun to fracture under the immense pressure of royal duties and public expectations. The Queen Consort's increasingly independent decisions regarding royal engagements had created a rift that seemed impossible to bridge. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had become an unexpected source of stability during these turbulent times. Her grace under pressure and natural ability to connect with both the public and royal family members had not gone unnoticed by the king. Unlike the complicated history that surrounded his marriage to Camilla, Catherine represented a fresh chapter for the monarchy, one unmarked by scandal or controversy. The king's private secretary knocked gently on the door, announcing the arrival of his most trusted advisors. As they filed into the ornate room, their faces reflected the gravity of the situation. The constitutional implications of what the king was considering were unprecedented in modern British history. Sir William Thornton, the king's principal private secretary, placed a leather-bound folder on the mahogany desk. Inside were documents that had been drafted in absolute secrecy over the past several weeks. The legal framework for such a dramatic change in the royal hierarchy had required extensive research into historical precedents and constitutional law. The meeting began with hushed tones as the advisors outlined the potential ramifications of the king's proposed decision. Public opinion polls had been secretly commissioned, showing surprising support for Catherine among the British people. While Camilla's approval ratings had steadily declined since the coronation, the younger generation in particular seemed to view Catherine as the future of the monarchy. Queen Camilla's recent public statements about modernizing royal traditions had created friction not only with the king, but also with senior members of the royal family. Her suggestion that certain ancient ceremonies should be abandoned had been met with strong opposition from traditionalists within the palace walls. These disagreements had become increasingly public, creating an uncomfortable spotlight on the royal marriage. Meanwhile, Catherine had quietly continued her royal duties with remarkable consistency and dedication. Her charitable work had expanded significantly, and her ability to represent the crown at international events had impressed foreign dignitaries and Commonwealth leaders alike. The contrast between the two women had become increasingly apparent to both the royal household and the watching world. The king's health concerns, though carefully hidden from the public, had also influenced his thinking. At his age, he understood the importance of securing a stable future for the monarchy. His decision was not born from personal animosity toward Camilla, but rather from a deep sense of duty to the institution he had spent his entire life preparing to lead. As the morning meeting concluded, the advisors left with clear instructions to begin the delicate process of laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most shocking announcements in royal history. The king remained alone in his study, fully aware that his next steps would forever change the landscape of the British monarchy and send shockwaves throughout the Commonwealth realms. The following Tuesday brought an unusual request that would set everything in motion. King Charles personally invited Catherine to a private lunch at Clarence House, away from the prying eyes of palace staff and media attention. The invitation came as a surprise to Catherine, who had been expecting a routine meeting about her upcoming royal engagements. Catherine arrived at the elegant Georgian mansion wearing a navy blue dress that had become her signature style. Her natural poise and warm smile masked any nervousness she might have felt about the mysterious nature of this meeting. The king greeted her personally at the entrance, a gesture that immediately signaled the importance of their conversation. Over a simple meal in the morning room, King Charles began to share his concerns about the future direction of the monarchy. He spoke candidly about the challenges facing the institution and his growing belief that significant changes were necessary to ensure its survival in the modern world. Catherine listened intently, her diplomatic training evident in her thoughtful responses. The king's voice carried a mixture of determination and vulnerability. As he outlined his vision for a renewed monarchy, he explained how Catherine's natural leadership qualities and genuine connection with people from all walks of life had convinced him that she possessed the qualities necessary to guide the royal family through the challenges ahead. When the king finally revealed his extraordinary proposition, Catherine's composure momentarily wavered. The suggestion that she could become queen consort while Camilla's position would be formally revoked seemed impossible to comprehend. The constitutional and personal implications were staggering, and Catherine immediately understood the weight of what was being asked of her. Catherine's first instinct was to decline, citing her loyalty to the established order and her respect for Queen Camilla. However, the king's passionate explanation of his reasoning began to resonate with her sense of duty. He spoke of his responsibility to put the institution above personal relationships and his belief that the monarchy needed strong, uncontroversial leadership to thrive. The conversation stretched well into the afternoon as they discussed the practical aspects of such a dramatic change. The king explained that extensive legal research had confirmed the constitutional possibility of such a decision, though it would require careful orchestration and impeccable timing to minimize potential backlash. Catherine requested time to discuss the matter with William, emphasizing that such a momentous decision could not be made without her husband's full support and understanding. The king agreed, recognizing that the success of his plan would depend entirely on the unified support of the next generation of royals. That evening, Catherine returned to Adelaide Cottage with her mind racing. The quiet Berkshire residence, which had become their family sanctuary, suddenly felt like the center of a constitutional earthquake. As she tucked her children into bed, she couldn't help but wonder how such a dramatic change would affect their young lives. The conversation with William that night was perhaps the most serious discussion of their marriage. They talked until dawn, weighing the potential benefits against the enormous personal cost such a decision would entail. William's initial shock gradually gave way to a pragmatic understanding of his father's reasoning. By morning, they had reached a tentative agreement to support the king's vision, provided certain conditions could be met. These included guarantees about the children's privacy, assurances about the transition process, and a clear timeline for the implementation of such dramatic changes. Catherine called the king's private secretary the next day to request another meeting, this time with William present. The stage was set for a decision that would reshape the British monarchy and capture the attention of the entire world. The second meeting took place in the king's private apartments at Windsor Castle, chosen specifically for its historical significance and complete privacy. William accompanied Catherine this time, his presence adding gravity to the discussions. The couple had spent countless hours analyzing every aspect of the king's proposal, and their questions reflected their thorough preparation. King Charles welcomed them with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He understood that their decision would determine not only the success of his plan, but also the future relationship between the generations of his family. The weight of potentially damaging these crucial bonds was not lost on him. William's questions were direct and practical. He wanted to understand the legal mechanisms that would allow such unprecedented changes, the timeline for implementation, and most importantly, how Queen Camilla would be informed of this decision. The king's answers revealed the extensive planning that had already taken place behind the scenes. The legal framework, the king explained, relied on historical precedents from earlier centuries when royal titles and positions were more fluid. Modern constitutional law allowed for such changes, provided they were executed through proper channels and with appropriate justification. The palace's legal team had spent weeks ensuring that every aspect would be constitutionally sound. Catherine raised concerns about the personal impact on all parties involved. Her relationship with Camilla, while not particularly close, had been respectful and cordial. The thought of being elevated at the expense of someone else's position troubled her deeply. The king acknowledged these concerns but emphasized that the decision was driven by institutional necessity rather than personal preference. The discussion turned to practical matters of timing and public presentation. The king's communications team had already begun developing strategies for more, announcing such momentous changes in a way that would minimize shock and maximize understanding among the British people and Commonwealth nations. Public opinion research, conducted discreetly through third-party organizations, had shown surprising receptivity to the idea of Catherine taking on a more prominent role. Focus groups consistently rated her favorably across all demographic categories. While support for Camilla had remained lukewarm since the coronation, international considerations also played a significant role in the planning. Commonwealth leaders had been subtly consulted about their views on potential changes to the royal hierarchy, and their responses had been overwhelmingly positive regarding Catherine's increased prominence. The meeting concluded with William and Zaya, Catherine agreeing in principle to support the king's vision, contingent upon several conditions. They insisted on a gradual transition process that would allow all parties to maintain their dignity, comprehensive security arrangements for their family during the potentially turbulent period, and a clear communication strategy that would explain the reasoning behind such dramatic changes. King Charles agreed to their conditions and set a preliminary timeline for the announcement. The plan would unfold over several months, beginning with subtle changes in royal duties and culminating in a formal announcement that would reshape the monarchy over the following weeks. The king's most trusted advisors worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail was considered. From constitutional requirements to media management strategies, the secrecy surrounding these preparations was absolute, with only a handful of people aware of the momentous changes being planned. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla continued her royal duties, unaware of the discussions taking place around her future. Her schedule remained full of engagements and official functions, though palace staff began to notice subtle changes in the dynamics of royal household meetings and planning sessions. Catherine found herself in an increasingly complex position as she continued her existing duties while mentally preparing for responsibilities she had never imagined assuming. The weight of the secret she carried affected her demeanor, though her professionalism ensured that these changes remained imperceptible to outside observers. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic transformations in modern royal history, with all parties moving toward a moment that would forever alter the British monarchy's landscape. The most delicate aspect of the entire process was determining how and when to inform Queen Camilla of the king's decision. This conversation, which everyone dreaded, could not be postponed indefinitely. King Charles spent sleepless nights contemplating how to approach the woman who had been his companion for decades with news that would fundamentally alter her life. The opportunity arose during a quiet weekend at Highgrove House, the king's beloved Gloucestershire retreat. The peaceful gardens and familiar surroundings seemed like the most appropriate setting for such a difficult conversation. Camilla had always found solace in the countryside estate, making it the ideal location for what would undoubtedly be a painful discussion. King Charles chose a morning walk through the organic gardens as the moment to begin the conversation. As they strolled past the wildflower meadows and carefully tended vegetable plots, he began by speaking generally about the pressures facing the monarchy and the difficult decisions required of a modern sovereign. Camilla listened with growing concern as the king's tone became increasingly serious. Her years of experience in navigating royal complexities had taught her to recognize when conversations carried deeper implications than their surface topics might suggest. The careful way Charles chose his words alerted her that something significant was developing when the king finally revealed his intentions. Camilla's reaction was a mixture of shock, hurt, and surprisingly, a degree of relief. The constant pressure of royal life, the relentless media scrutiny, and the ongoing challenges of winning public acceptance had taken a greater toll than she had admitted, even to herself. The conversation that followed was perhaps the most honest and emotional exchange of their long relationship. Camilla expressed her feelings of betrayal and confusion, while simultaneously acknowledging the institutional pressures that had led to this moment. Her pain was evident, but so was her understanding of the complex forces at work. King Charles emphasized that the decision was not a reflection of personal failure or inadequacy on Camilla's part. Instead, he explained it as a strategic choice designed to strengthen the monarchy's future prospects. The distinction provided little comfort, but it helped frame the decision in terms of duty rather than personal rejection. The discussion of practical arrangements proved equally challenging. Camilla's future role, her financial security, her place within the family structure, and her relationship with other royal family members all required careful consideration. The king assured her that she would retain her dignity, security, and place within the extended royal family. Over the following days, Camilla struggled to process the enormous changes ahead. Her friends noticed a subdued quality to her demeanor, though her public appearances remained professionally executed. The private pain of the situation was carefully hidden from public view, maintaining the royal family's tradition of presenting a united front regardless of internal challenges. Meanwhile, senior palace staff began receiving subtle indications that significant changes were imminent. Adjustments to protocol, modifications to ceremonial procedures, and quiet reshuffling of responsibilities signaled that something major was developing behind the palace walls. The king's communications team worked frantically to develop messaging strategies that would present the changes in the most positive light possible. Opinion polls were commissioned to test various explanations and approaches, with focus groups providing valuable insights into public reactions to different narratives, and international diplomatic channels were quietly activated to prepare Commonwealth leaders and foreign governments for the upcoming announcement. These preliminary discussions helped ensure that the changes would be understood within the broader context of institutional modernization rather than personal drama. Catherine found herself in an increasingly surreal position as she continued her regular duties while knowing that everything was about to change dramatically. Her public appearances took on added significance, as media observers began to notice subtle differences in how she was being positioned within royal events. The secret weighed heavily on all participants as the final preparations moved toward completion. Each public appearance, every media interview, and all family interactions carried the knowledge that a seismic shift in the royal hierarchy was imminent. The countdown to the announcement had begun, with all parties preparing for the moment when this carefully guarded secret would transform into one of the most significant royal revelations in modern history. The announcement was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, timed to maximize global media coverage while allowing sufficient preparation time for key stakeholders. The palace's communications machinery moved into overdrive as the historic moment approached. With every detail choreographed to ensure maximum impact and clarity, the king's private secretary personally contacted the Prime Minister's office to provide advance notice of the announcement. Constitutional protocol required that the government be informed of such significant changes before they became public knowledge. The Prime Minister's reaction was one of surprise, but ultimate support for the monarch's decision. Similar notifications were sent to Commonwealth leaders, ensuring that the news would not catch allied nations off guard. The responses varied from cautious optimism to enthusiastic support, with most emphasizing their continued loyalty to the crown, regardless of its internal arrangements. On the morning of the announcement, Buckingham Palace buzzed with unprecedented activity. Media representatives from around the world gathered in anticipation of what palace sources had described as a significant statement regarding the future of the monarchy. The speculation was intense, with royal correspondents offering various theories about the nature of the upcoming news. King Charles appeared before the cameras at precisely 11 o'clock. His demeanor serious but confident. The ornate setting of the palace's grand staircase provided a appropriately formal backdrop for what would become one of the most memorable royal announcements in decades. His statement was carefully crafted to emphasize institutional necessity rather than personal preference. The king spoke eloquently about the evolving nature of the monarchy and the importance of positioning the institution for future success. He praised Queen Camilla's service while explaining that changing circumstances required new approaches to royal leadership. The announcement of Catherine's elevation to Queen Consort was presented as a natural progression that reflected both her proven capabilities and the public's overwhelming support, the king's words emphasized continuity and stability rather than dramatic change, positioning the decision as an evolution rather than a revolution. The immediate media reaction was explosive. News channels around the world interrupted regular programming to cover the breaking story, while social media platforms experienced unprecedented traffic as people shared their reactions to the stunning announcement. The hashtags related to the story quickly became globally trending topics. Catherine's first public appearance following the announcement took place that same afternoon during a previously scheduled visit to a children's hospital in London. Her composure, under the intense media scrutiny, demonstrated the poise that had influenced the king's decision. And her interaction with the young patients showed the genuine warmth that had endeared her to the British public. The hospital visit became a powerful visual representation of the new queen, consort's priorities and personality. Images of Catherine comforting sick children and speaking earnestly with medical staff dominated evening news broadcasts, providing positive reinforcement for the king's controversial decision. Public reaction polls conducted in the hours following the announcement showed surprising levels of support for the changes. While there was certainly controversy and criticism, the overall response was more positive than even the palace's most optimistic projections had anticipated. Queen Camilla's first public statement, released through the palace later that evening, displayed remarkable grace and dignity. Her words emphasized her gratitude for the opportunity to serve and her continued support for the royal family. The statement helped diffuse potential criticism and demonstrated her commitment to maintaining family unity despite personal disappointment. International media coverage varied significantly, with some outlets focusing on the constitutional implications while others emphasized the personal drama. However, the overall tone was one of fascination rather than condemnation, suggesting that the changes might be more acceptable to global opinion than critics had feared. The financial markets showed minimal reaction to the news, indicating that investors viewed the changes as internal royal matters rather than factors affecting political or economic stability. This response provided reassurance that the announcement had not damaged confidence in British institutions. By evening, it was clear that the first day had been successfully navigated. The announcement had been made without major incidents. Public reaction was manageable, and the key players had all performed their roles admirably. However, everyone involved understood that this was merely the beginning of a complex transition process that would unfold over many months. The weeks following the announcement brought a whirlwind of changes that touched every aspect of royal life. Catherine's transition into her new role required extensive preparation. From wardrobe consultations to constitutional briefings, the magnitude of her new responsibilities became increasingly apparent as she immersed herself in the complex world of senior royal duties. The ceremonial aspects of the transition were carefully orchestrated to maintain dignity while symbolizing the changing of the guard. Catherine's first official engagement as Queen Consort was a state visit from the German Chancellor, an event that provided an ideal opportunity to demonstrate her diplomatic capabilities on the world stage. Her performance during the German visit exceeded all expectations. Catherine's natural warmth and intelligence shone through in her interactions with foreign dignitaries, while her attention to protocol details impressed even the most traditional palace staff members. The visit was unanimously declared a success by both British and German officials. Queen Camilla's adjustment to her new circumstances proved more challenging than anticipated. While she maintained her public composure and continued supporting various charitable organizations, friends noticed signs of the personal toll the changes had taken. Her gradual withdrawal from certain high-profile events was managed carefully to avoid creating additional controversy. The relationship between Catherine and Camilla required delicate navigation during this transition period. Both women understood the importance of presenting a united front publicly. Despite the awkwardness of their changed circumstances, their interactions during family events were professionally cordial, though the warmth of their previous relationship had inevitably been affected. Public opinion tracking showed that support for Catherine's elevation continued. to grow as people witnessed her performance in the new role. Her natural ability to connect with people from all backgrounds, combined with her obvious dedication to her duties, gradually won over even some initial skeptics. The international response also evolved positively over time. Commonwealth leaders who had initially expressed reservations began to praise Catherine's approach to her new responsibilities. Her first solo overseas trip to Canada was particularly well received, with Canadian officials noting her genuine interest in their country's concerns and challenges. King Charles watched the transition unfold with a mixture of relief and pride. His controversial decision appeared to be vindicated by the smooth implementation and positive reception. The monarchy's approval ratings, which had been a source of concern, began to show improvement as the changes took effect. The impact on William and Catherine's children required ongoing attention and support. While they had been prepared for their mother's changing role, the reality of increased security measures and media attention still represented a significant adjustment for the young family. Special arrangements were made to preserve as much normalcy as possible in their daily lives. The legal and constitutional aspects of the transition were completed with remarkable efficiency. The complex paperwork required to formalize Catherine's new status and revoke Camilla's previous position was processed through proper channels without major complications. Legal scholars noted the precedent-setting nature of the changes for future constitutional discussions. Media coverage gradually shifted from sensationalism to substantive analysis of Catherine's performance and the monarchy's evolving role. Royal correspondents began focusing on policy implications and institutional changes rather than personal drama, suggesting that the initial controversy was beginning to settle into acceptance. As the first year of Catherine's tenure as Queen Consort drew to a close, even the most severe critics had to acknowledge the success of the transition. Her approval ratings consistently exceeded those of any royal family member except the king himself. While public support for the monarchy showed signs of renewed strength, the long-term implications of King Charles's bold decision continued to unfold. But the immediate results suggested that his gamble had paid off. The monarchy appeared more relevant, more connected to contemporary British society, and better positioned for future challenges than it had been in years. Catherine's transformation from Princess of Wales to Queen Consort represented more than a change in title. It symbolized the monarchy's ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential character and purpose. The controversial decision that had once seemed impossible had become a new chapter in the ongoing story of the British royal family.